to purchase the property on 119 West Water Street, the Congress building. So I'd like to welcome Dawson Tyler and Joe Watts and Stephanie to the meeting to consider waiving the right of first refusal to the purchase of the Congress building. And I understand you'll be making a brief statement to the council.
Yes, sir.
Or presentation, I should say.
Well, it's just a statement. Mayor Stallings, council members, Manager Knighton, thank you for this opportunity to come before you tonight. You know, in June of 2018, my wife and I found out something that you all already knew. And that was that Edenton is a very special place. And we visited here and found that some of the key elements to what makes Edenton so wonderful is the history, the amazing buildings, the historical buildings here, and the people. And we jumped right in on the buildings with taking on a house project, and by last year we decided that the people part was so important that we left our home in Colorado and became full-time Edentonians because we love it here. Everything we do here is about being part of the community, and we don't want to just be consumers of this great town. Our goal is to be contributors to the town. And so the projects that we've undertaken to this point have had that as our thrust. When the opportunity presented itself to take on the project of the Conger building, particularly to work with the fine folks at Downey's Preservation that share the same perspective on restoration, preservation, and making the community a better place for all, we were very excited. And this has really taken things to the next level for us. We very much hope that you would appreciate your vote tonight to waive the right of first refusal so that we can purchase this property and begin work in short order to get the project moving again and have it ultimately be a fantastic place for the people of Edenton, family, friends, and visitors to come and enjoy the space. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Just wanted to say something real quick about the building. I'll keep it brief as well. I think that Joe did a great job of covering the reasons why this is so important to carry this project forward. It just could be a game changer for downtown and bring a new type of tourist to town. But one of the things that I also wanted to really emphasize as a historian and a preservationist is, that building really fits into kind of the core historic values of Edenton. It's another really interesting part of the history of this part of the world that heretofore has not been shared in Edenton or really elsewhere. I mean, there are very few of these industrial buildings that were associated with the fishing industry here and other industries, that once flourished on this waterfront that are still left. And in talking with our partners about this, we really look forward to highlighting that and having it be something that fits into the fabric of this beautiful waterfront, the Barker House, and all the other historic attractions in Edenton as well. There's just so much there that's original that we're going to bring to the fore so that everybody can enjoy it. And that's it.
Thank you, Dawson. As I've said to you many times, you have done a lot of work in Edenton to help restore some of these older properties, and you've done a great job with it. And Joe and Stephanie, we certainly appreciate your investment in the town of Edenton, and we're looking forward to seeing great things done with the Conger building. Does anyone else up here have any? Yes, sir.
I just had a couple of questions. Not sure which one can answer that. The brew pub was set to be a craft beer brewery. Are we still in the business of making beer there? Has that remained consistent, or has that been changed?
You want to take that, Joe, or you want me to take it?
We'll drink anything over here. We're just really wanting to know what if it's to be made on the premises, or if it's to be more of a pub and restaurant.
And that decision has not yet been made. We know we're going to be serving beer in the facility. We are working with a brewer, a North Carolina brewer, and we're looking at how much of that brew process would we have here. There, you go all the way from grain to glass. You can do fermenting only, or you can just serve beer. And we're not sure where that spectrum will land as we take the project forward and we have a chance to engage with the brewer. You have to forgive me because we haven't been in this that long since this opportunity presented itself. But there will be beer served, and likely there will be food service as well.
Okay. And one other question. I know there was a concern with some of the residents about the border between the park, the buffing between the park and the brewery. And I noticed that the tree committee was not invited to be a part of designing that buffer. I would think that would, maybe the landscaping, the tree committee should be involved in the buffer development between the park and the brew pub. I didn't notice that in the agreement that we had with the previous owner.
So, are you asking for a buffer between the Conger property and the private property, or
The public property.
the public property? Oh, there will be, as part of the application for certificate of appropriateness to the Historic Preservation Commission,
Okay.
there is a requirement that there be an appropriate screening between their property, and really was focused on the playground.
Yeah.
So we can certainly get the tree committee's input and advice on that, but that would be part of the Preservation Commission review as well.
Okay.
And so just so we're clear on procedure, tonight, really the only issue before us is the waiver of the right of first refusal that the town holds. And these guys don't know fully what their plans are, but we'll have the opportunity to hear those plans and make further suggestions about what we think are reasonable later.
Okay.
So we're probably not going to get into the weeds tonight, nor should we. I think it's just a matter of whether we think it's a good idea to waive the right of first refusal. But those are all good questions.
We do like
Roger.
weeds. We do like the weeds. We like weeds. We do like weeds, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes too much.
I have a historical quick question. Dawson, maybe you know, how long did it serve as an ice house?
So, get varying degrees of answers on this, but right around the kickoff of World War I, essentially. And then at
1917 or
14, I've heard, 15, somewhere in there.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to thank them for getting started on this. It's a project that's been in the wings for a long time, and if they're successful, we will look successful. So, wish you all the best, and I'm sure the council will be very supportive of getting everything off the ground.
We will.
Okay. Can't hear any further questions or comments. I'll ask for a motion.
So moved, Mayor.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Not all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. So we have now waived the first refusal. Okay. All right. And next we'll welcome Courtney Cortell. She's the executive director of Albemarle Hopeline and is here to present her annual report.
Thank you all
You
again.
guys are willing to,
Thank you,
perfectly willing to leave, or you can welcome to stay. Thank you.
You're right.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Not sure if anyone's zooming in this evening as well, so I will introduce our agency just briefly for anyone who's not familiar. Albemarle Helpline is a victim services agency providing comprehensive services to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault in northeastern North Carolina. We serve 6 counties from Chowan to Currituck. This coming October, our organization will celebrate its 40th anniversary, which is very exciting because to me it says we have, as a community, raised an entire generation that has always had somewhere to go in the face of violence. I'll keep my remarks short this evening because we have a lot of other business to get to, but as we're also at the 1-year anniversary of the coronavirus pandemic, I felt the need to let the council know how that's affected our work, particularly as it pertains to domestic violence. If you think about where we were exactly a year ago now, courthouses were closed down. Law enforcement agencies locked their doors. You had to call ahead or get an appointment. We told people to stay at home, that they were safer at home. But of course, when it comes to families that have interpersonal violence, we know that not everyone is safer at home. Children were cut off from their mandatory reporters when they were sent home from school. So child abuse went unreported, domestic violence went unreported. Our 24-hour crisis line, none of our operations ceased, but in the spring of 2020, no one was calling us. And we know that that doesn't mean that no one was in harm's way, that no one was getting hurt. It just means that they were too afraid to reach out for help. And the idea of coming to a shelter in the middle of a pandemic is terrifying in and of itself, right? So we pivoted as much as we could to try to meet people where they were. In the spring of 2020, we launched a web chat service in addition to our telephone hotline in case someone was trapped at home and couldn't safely make a phone call out. They could text in or chat in and reach an advocate that way. We did get a message from one victim who said that they were pretending to be in the shower and their abuser was in the next room, and what could we do to help them? We were trying to think, okay, what's open? How can we reach people? How can we let people know that we're still here? So we made flyers and put them in restaurant to-go bags, in food pantry to-go bags, just trying to make sure that anybody that might need our help knew that we were still around. We moved our support groups online, which is something we're hoping to do even moving forward, because that reduces the barrier of transportation, keeps people from having to worry about childcare. As long as they can put the kids in front of a cartoon and get on a computer for 30 minutes, they can connect with other people. So that helped a lot with the isolation. As an alternative to shelter, we did offer hotel stays for families that were at higher risk to reduce the capacity of our shelter. We are very fortunate that our shelter has private bedrooms, private bathrooms. The only shared facility in the shelter is the kitchen, and so we were able to just rotate families through and disinfect really well in between. As the year progressed and things started to reopen and kids started going back to school, right around September, October, the demand for our services just skyrocketed. The number of crisis calls we received in those 6 months versus the prior 6 months doubled. This is good news. It means people are finally reaching out for help, but what we did see from the fall through now is that the cases we're receiving are more severe. We're seeing more instances of strangulation. We're seeing more severe injuries. Whether that's an indicator of how much stress families were under or how long it took people to reach out for help, I couldn't really speculate, but definitely more complex cases. And our agency works not only on crisis response and people's immediate safety, but also on their long-term sustainability, right? So normally when somebody comes to shelter, we have about a 90-day goal to get them moved out of shelter, to make sure that they have a safe place to live, they have a job. You can understand that right now all of that's taken a lot longer, right? Jobs are a lot more scarce. Childcare is very scarce. Some kids are still doing their virtual learning, so our shelter has become a homeschool virtual learning on top of everything else. And with the eviction moratorium, housing is very scarce, and the houses that are available, there's a lot of businesses and landlords are looking for very large deposits because they don't know once someone moves in, they're going to continue to pay their rent. So those are a lot of the barriers that we're facing. Obviously, with the court system, things are a little bit backed up. Criminal court's starting up again, which is good, but it's been hard for victims to get closure. Their hearings are postponed, that sort of thing. Everybody's doing the absolute best they can, but it's not a criticism of the court system. It just is taking everything that much longer. So our advocates are really putting in a lot more hours on each case than they might normally have to. So I'm very, very thankful to have such a dedicated staff that have stuck with us through all of this and rolled with the punches. And like I said, we've never ceased our operations this whole time. Anne Marie is in receipt of our allocation request for the upcoming fiscal year. We have held steady at our allocation since at least 2008, is as far back as I had my finance manager go. I don't want to be sitting in your seats because I'm sure that the needs in the community far outweigh the resources right now, but we did request that if the council could consider an increase in our allocation for the upcoming fiscal year, it would be tremendously helpful in trying to overcome some of these barriers and helping the families that we're working with, because the normal 2 to 3 month shelter stay, that's not what we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with 6 to 9 months, just because it takes that much longer to get these families stable and back on their feet. But we are so appreciative of everything that the town has done for us. I'm so thankful that I get to come see you all every year and be able to share the work that we're doing. Does anyone have any questions that I might be able to field or concerns that I could address?
Tell me, are your advocates, are those volunteer positions, are those paid staff, or a combination?
Our advocates are all paid staff, and part of the reason for that is that you have to have a certain degree of training in the state of North Carolina to achieve advocate privilege,
Okay.
so that all of the information shared between advocates and clients is confidential.
Okay. Do you use volunteers to assist at all? Do you have that capability?
We use the volunteers in a lot of support capacity. With the situations that we're dealing with, it's very important that all of our advocates, everybody that's answering the hotline, be highly, highly trained professionals. So what we use volunteers mostly for is for support in running the shelter and doing maintenance and doing yard work, things like that. We utilize interns a lot to help with like support groups and children's services as kind of supplements to our trained staff, and for fundraising purposes as well. We use volunteers for that.
Thank you. I don't envy your position and seeing suffering every day. That's got to take a toll on everybody.
We are definitely one of the few businesses that would like to go out of business for lack of need of our services, but unfortunately that is not where we are. So I'm very thankful for the advocates that do this hard work day in and day out. Sir?
Did you say once your phone started ringing, your cases double, or did I misunderstand you?
So from July through December, the number of crisis calls that we received doubled from the prior 6 months. And those cases, as I said, were a lot more severe than what we normally see.
Did you have enough room to put, I'm figuring out that some of these cases that you had to remove the people from the homes that they were in, did you have enough room to put them up?
We did, and we supplemented with some hotel stays too to kind of reduce the capacity in the shelter. If we were dealing with a family that, for example, had really high-risk health conditions and they were nervous about coming to shelter, so we did utilize hotel stays, which is something that we don't normally love to do, but in this case, it actually made some families feel safer than the idea of congregate shelter.
Are you still full to capacity?
At the moment, the shelter is not full, and we do still have some hotel funds. We were fortunate to get some CARES Act funding that supplements the hotel stays where needed.
Thank you.
Where is your shelter, Gordon?
It's in Elizabeth City, and we have transportation services for people in the outlying counties. We do have a satellite office here in Edenton for court advocacy and counseling.
Do you have difficulty finding qualified staff?
I'm very fortunate that most of our staff have been there for a very long time. They're really passionate about the work that they do. I'm the newbie. I've only been there 2.5 years, but our shelter manager has been with us for more than 30 years. My associate director has been with us for more than 20 years. it is hard getting master's level we do provide licensed therapy and counseling on site. And especially since ECSU did away with their MSW program, it's a little harder to recruit master's level clinicians to this area. But fortunately, once we find the right folks, they tend to stay for a while. Actually, our Edenton advocate just moved here from Tennessee because her center was closed down for lack of funding, and she was so passionate about the work that she moved over here to continue to serve victims. So.
Does anyone else have any questions of Courtney?
If I could just say, I would just like to thank Courtney. Albemarle Hopeline has a wonderful partnership with our law enforcement agencies and especially the police department. And I can tell the council that what Courtney said to you about during COVID, seeing a dramatic increase in calls for help, we see that in our reports to the police department. And I'm always pleased when I see a report about a potential domestic violence call that our officers are sharing the information with victims about Hopeline. So we're trying to make sure that the people that we encounter locally know about the resource as well. And I know if Chief were here tonight, he would thank you and your team for all that you do to help the citizens of Edenton.
We're very thankful for our partnerships with law enforcement, for sure. Because there are a lot of people that don't necessarily, they're not ready to go through the criminal justice system yet. They're not ready to press charges. They're afraid to press charges. And we can still work with all of those families regardless of what choices they make in terms of criminal justice. So we're thankful that they have our information in their patrol cars, they share it, and they go out on domestic calls, and we're very thankful for that partnership.
Anyone else have any questions or statements? Courtney, we certainly thank you for coming and speaking to us today and telling us your history, and we certainly appreciate that, and we look forward to a long, continued relationship with your organization.
Thank you.
It's a shame that we have to have organizations like this, but it's real life, so, and we're pleased that we can help with that.
I appreciate that, Mayor. And I know a lot of you are involved in a lot of other organizations in the community. We are always looking for other folks to talk to, whether it be a church group or a Rotary Club or anything like that, just to make sure that everyone in the community knows that we're available and knows how to help if you had a friend or a family member in that situation. So thank you so much. I'll let you all get to your other business this evening. Stay safe, and hopefully when I see you next year, we'll be seeing all of each other's faces. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, item G on our list is an amendment, let's see, timeout. There's a budget amendment for the street repairs and resurfacing. It's a budget amendment. So I'll call Anne Marie to go over that, please.
Yes, Mayor. So as I wrote to you over the weekend that, and I had told you prior that we had paused Barnhill's work on our resurfacing project because we encountered extensive amounts of poor soils that were much more than what was anticipated. And so we paused the contractor so that we could develop a plan of action for you to consider. And we've identified several streets that were part of the resurfacing plan that we think can be deferred. That would be a portion of East Freemason Street and a portion of East Queen Street. And that funds from this deferment, along with an appropriation from reserves, $245,000, would complete the paving project, and you would still be able to complete repaving Oakdale Drive, East Carteret Street, finish East King Street, which has really been the culprit. The majority of the bad soils were on East King Street, and then East Eden Street. And Virginia prepared 2 budget amendments for you to consider. One amendment would appropriate funding from the reserve to the general fund appropriated fund balance. And then the second amendment transfers the funds from that appropriated fund balance line item in the general fund, transfers that into the capital projects paving ordinance. And I'm really, really pleased to report to you, we've been informed by our auditor that the audit as submitted has been approved by the LGC, but we have not yet received the actual audit to be distributed. Virginia's been calling, I've been calling. Evidently the LGC is, even though it's been approved, they haven't loaded it up onto the website where we get access to it. But we're really, really pleased. I can't wait for the auditors to come and make their presentation to you, because we added $819,000 to the reserve last year. Now, $309,000 of that was for the proceeds received when the Conger building property was sold. But even subtracting that 309 from the 819,000, to add $510,000 to the reserves is a significant achievement. And without that achievement, we would have been hard pressed to recommend that you appropriate $245,000 for this project. But really, really pleased. I thank Virginia and the department heads for their work managing and monitoring their budgets to allow for that amount of money to be put into the savings account. So happy to try and answer any questions.
Anne Marie, where was the worst soil? Over there in the Cotton Mill area, McMullen, Wood, King?
So there were three places that the subsurface soil was in bad shape. It was between Dr. Bull's office and the Cotton Mill. There was about a 300-foot run there. There was also a second area on that same street where McMullen turns to King that was just about the same length, same type soil type. And then also at the intersection of King and Wood, up into the intersection of Elliott Street. So those three places were just, they could not hold new asphalt. There was no.
I notice you have piles of soil and sand along King toward the Cotton Mill. Will you be using all that?
Most of that has been removed.
Okay.
Most of that was the bad soil that was dug out between the Queen Anne Walkway Park and the 400 block of East King. Most of that was removed from that one section. So that was 1/3 of the total amount that was removed. So it was a substantial amount of soil that had to be taken out. What's left there will be for dressing the shoulders of the road back to the edge of asphalt.
Is that difficult for the engineers to decide on or anticipate, just looking at roads before they're dug up? I mean, you just don't know until you.
You don't know, and what was peculiar about this is last time when we did the phase 1, we specifically requested this time that a portion of the funding would be there for bore samples. And where we had any worries, we had those bore samples performed. Well, then you hit these pockets that are just not anticipated. Everything else appears to be fine for, the previous 500 feet, and you hit a 300-foot pocket, and past that you have another 500 feet of good soil. And so there was nothing from the surface that you could identify that would say, hey, we need to core these streets in these places to prevent this.
Corey, what determines it as bad soil?
So whenever the crews come in, they remove the either 1.5 inches or 4 inches of asphalt from the surface. The company then comes back in and will apply base asphalt. And they do that when the soils appear to be stable enough to hold new asphalt. So that's one way it's identified, is in the process of applying surface asphalt, the asphalt will begin to pump. And it starts to pulse underneath any weight, underneath any traffic. It begins to open up as it settles. And so that's one way you find bad soils. And the next, of course, is when you remove the asphalt, the initial pass, and you remove that asphalt. And now you're looking at the soil, and you can clearly see that even just from removing the asphalt, that the soil wasn't stable enough to even put base back on. And so there's two ways of finding it. One is after base asphalt has been put down, where it appears like, hey, this should work. And then there's the other where you've removed the asphalt before you can even get the base back on the soil. Just from trying to get trucks out, you're like, it's not gonna hold.
This has come up before, and every time it comes up, I got a lot to say about it. We had a bond here last winter, and the engineer said on this paper that they didn't know the soil was so poor. But did the engineers check the soil last year before they did all of the paving? Now these streets this year is worse than I ever seen them. I recommend it because when they get through and get paved, the potholes still can pop up. And I recommend it to you, Court, about that roller. When you put asphalt in those holes, that's gotta be hot, and you need to roll it. Because if you don't, soon as you do it, cave right in. It looks like a spit, but it's bad. The corner around there from Broad Street, going around the corner to, I think it's Oakland Street, where Colony Towers is, that street down there got holes in it that deep. And you can't go down the street trying to miss holes. But when they're gone, when the contractor's gone, the potholes can still pop up. So I think the city, the town needs a roller that it can put asphalt down with a torch and heat it up and roll it like it's supposed to be.
And we have a smaller type, it's a non-vibratory type roller that we use for typical potholes, that will crown the surface and come back through. But I do agree, we don't have the type of roller to be able to vibrate into a surface where you don't have enough, really where the surface is delaminated, where you don't have enough surface there for the new material to hold and to really push in. As far as near Colony Tire with Broad and Coke Avenue, I am meeting Thursday with DOT to go through some of the paving that they have docketed for this season, as well as some of the areas that we're getting some additional calls, some additional complaints that are state maintained roads that just let either in February or March. And so Coke Avenue is one that I have been in contact with them specifically about, because you're right, we've tried to patch those areas with the type of equipment that we have, and the problem with the asphalt continues to reappear because we don't have the right type of equipment to make those repairs last longer. So I agree with what you're saying.
But the good news is that Coke Avenue is scheduled to be repaved this spring, West Queen Street, and, oh my gosh, one other street. Not Broad Street, we wish Broad Street was on the list. Broad Street's not scheduled to be repaved until,
Martin Luther King.
you're right, thank you, Martin Luther King will be repaved this spring. But asked DOT, please, they've got to do something about potholes on Broad Street. And that's when they reached out to Corey to talk to him about locations. So
Yeah.
hopefully that will be fixed. Temporarily, the patches will be made. And then in places where we have large, more like a utility cut, if we need to bring in a contractor to use the type of equipment, not a Barn Hill, because they're big contractors, but Corey's developed relationships with 2 smaller companies that have that equipment, and that they can come in when we need them to do more of the extensive type of repair that you speak about.
Anne Marie, if we have any money left over when the project's complete, will you go back and look at the 2 deferred streets?
Yes.
Sure, they'll be first on the list for the next project,
For
and
the
if
next
there
one.
is funds, but I
If
doubt
it-
there's.
That
gonna
will,
be
there won't
funds.
be, okay. We may need to do another budget amendment.
Yeah.
And we talk about the deferred streets that we can consider, depending on funding, at least blocks. 100 block from intersection to intersection, 200 block from intersection to intersection. We may have the ability, depending on how things go with the remaining streets now, to pave where it makes sense for that instead of that entire length, where places would aesthetically match what needs to be fixed.
But right now, you're pretty tight, you're saying.
I think it would be much, save a lot of money if the town will get the appropriate equipment that they need, because fixing these holes is a every week job. You fix some over here, and next week some pops up over there, all over the town. And it would be cheaper to hire a couple of people with the right equipment instead of putting the asphalt down and patting it with a shovel. Truck will pack it, but it also pull it out the hole too. Now, instead of going and getting a smaller contractor to come in and do it, you gotta make money, you gotta pay for it. I think the town would be cheaper to get their own equipment.
Well, we can do an analysis, we can look at what that would cost, and bring the council a proposal.
What kind of money would you be looking at, Corey, to buy the type of equipment that we're talking about here?
It depends.
Not cheap.
It would be pretty pricey for newer stuff. We talk about 4-foot width versus 8-foot to 10-foot width. It's kind of one price range, and you can step on up to that 21, 22-foot width paving.
What you have now, you're okay with patching the type of roller you have now, you're okay
I've
with it?
never seen the roller. I ain't
I've
never
seen it
the
out
roller.
there, I've seen it out there, yeah.
You never see what with a pool?
I've never seen the roller.
It's a-
Roller that they
it's a-
got small ones
It's a small.
that is heavy enough to pack a place, asphalt that's broke out. They got some that got a 3-foot spool, 4-foot spool. And you don't need a small one, but you don't need a great big one either. But to put this asphalt in these holes, if you do that, then you won't have to get Barn Hill or any other big company to come in and you gotta get engineers and you gotta get contractors and all that stuff to subcontract stuff, and they just, in the wintertime, they just, who would want someplace to work in the wintertime? But big cities will not let contractors come in and tear up their streets during the wintertime because the weather's too bad. You can't tell what the next day's gonna be. I've said that before, that's my argument.
I understand, we appreciate that, but we'll get some prices together and, come back to the Public Works Committee with some ideas of what it would cost if we were to try to upgrade the equipment.
And I do feel like we are equipped for the utility cuts. When we do a water sewer tap or stormwater repair, where we can, symmetrically prep and repave. And when we talk about some of the areas where, as we approach the intersection, that's when we consider more of a paver type. So you can shadow in from nothing and build up to a certain height.
I think you've got a good protocol going. I've seen it work. You prep, and then that roller is coming in after that to you lay your asphalt and then roll it. But just I know it's small, but I think it does the job.
Okay.
Yeah, how soon will we be able to get Barnhill back to work?
I would say, I'd say within the next 30 days would be reasonable, to get them back in. I've already stayed in communication with them, as far as, assessing these last remaining streets, so we can get revised updates on quantities, and I think we can get them back in fairly soon.
Finishing King Street, is that one of your last remaining streets, Finishing King?
How many streets are left after this project that we're doing now? How many streets would be left that we would have to pay for?
We would reassess where we've been over the last 4 years. We would do a condition assessment based on each road, and we would reevaluate that list. From 2017, the priority 1 and priority 2 streets at that time that were assessed for condition, we have cleared that list. So the ones that were in the worst shape in 17 has been cleared in phase 1 paving and phase 2 after this is done. And then it'd be time to reassess some of the smaller streets, which I think would be where those dollar amounts would go further.
Would this reassessment be done before we get into our budget preparation?
I would imagine
It would
not.
be
Okay.
part of what we want to look at for
Okay,
July.
great. So what you're saying is a good possibility we go into a phase 3 next fiscal year.
Depending, we have to look at how we
Yeah.
would fund,
Right.
you know, and how big, what, like Councilman Bond's saying, how many more streets? Let's look and see what kind of plan of action we can put together.
We'll have a better number of remaining streets, I'd say, before our budget.
Okay, any further questions of Anne Marie or Corey? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget amendment.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, the next is a memo for the engineering services agreement for wastewater treatment plant expansion. And I'll call on Ms. Knighton to discuss that for us, please.
Yes, and I apologize, at the last regular meeting, I recommended that you all approve the contract with Terracon. They're the company that we procured services to do the geotechnical and groundwater work, assessing the expansion of spray field sites. But the Wooten Company informed me that USDA requires that you contract with the Wooten Company, and they have a contract with Terracon. And so I'm asking that, I recommend that you rescind the agreement that you approved with Terracon on March 9th, and then approve this agreement with the Wooten Company, which is an amendment to their engineering services that allows them to have sub-consultant for the geotechnical services. Does that make sense?
Can we do all that in one motion, or can we do that? Okay.
Is there any change in price? Just, okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that finishes our special meeting, and now we'll go into our committee meetings, and the first on the list there is the Administrative Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman High.
Thank you, Mayor Stallings. We have 4 agenda items we need to discuss tonight. The first one is the high school athletic accomplishment sign that we've talked about previously, and unfortunately, I'm going to ask that we table that once again. Athletic Director Matera let us know that he would not be able to meet with us by Zoom. There's several reasons for that. As we all know, it's been an unusual year for us all, and it's certainly been an unusual sports calendar year for the high school, and baseball is going to be this spring. He's right in the middle of football season. And he asked that we table it until June because of the baseball season and football season running concurrently. And also we discussed some other additions to the sign, including an earlier champion from D.F. Walker. I think it was 1962, 1963. He wants to be as inclusive as possible and make sure we're including everything we need to include. So for those reasons, I don't have a problem tabling it if no one else has an objection to that. Is that okay, Councilman Bond?
Sounds good.
Okay, if we can just table that, Ms. Knight, and we'll get back in touch with Mr. Matera about that. The second item, I'm pleased to announce that we have Mayor Stallings, our DDE Executive Director, Jennifer Harris, and also Town Manager Anne Marie Knighton here with us tonight to talk about an update on the Hotel Hinton. Everybody will recall a couple meetings ago we requested an update on this project along with the Brew Pub project and the second grocery store project. And we've received favorable reports on 2 of those, and from what I understand, we're about to receive a favorable report from the 3 of you on the Hotel Hinton project. So I thank y'all for looking into it and being able to come back and give us a report. So with that being said, I'll just hand it over to you guys.
Jennifer, we'll call on you if you will to update us on that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Mayor Stallings and Amory and I were able to meet with a member of the Saga group 2 weeks ago, and we got a wonderful report that the new roof is on the building. It's in good shape, so we were thrilled. I know everybody in town was mighty excited to see those cranes. I shared with the Saga group that I had gotten lots of calls. People thought that meant that the hotel was being developed, and there were lots of cheers, but I think that was encouraging for them to hear that all of us were so excited to see the cranes. In addition to the new roof, the Saga group is also contracted with an environmental restoration group who will come in and remove any materials and debris that was caused from the leaking roof. So they're hoping that once they have this environmental group come in, that the building will be safe for us to all go and tour. And they're even potentially planning an event for the spring or summer, which I'll tell you about in a second. As you know, in the past, their financial plans for the hotel development have relied heavily on bank financing, and we all know that we've gotten very close over the years, and ultimately it fell through for one reason or another. Obviously, with COVID, bank financing is very hard for hotels right now. The group has kind of circled back. They feel like they have a new plan in place to potentially redevelop the hotel. That would include more owner financing and also private investment from their investment group, and then also potentially local investors here in Edenton. So that event that they're thinking about having in the hotel building would be one that would pitch their plan to potential local investors. They're hoping to do it either this spring or early summer, which I think is very encouraging. DDE, we have offered to help them in any way possible with that event. So that is where we are. You know, there's a new roof, they're cleaning out debris, which is wonderful, and they're looking at a plan forward to potentially get this building redeveloped. They were so excited to see the projects we have in place now. They met the owners of Surf, Wind and Fire, and they had a great conversation, and they were really impressed with the development going on at that building. We told them about the Habit building and the plans there moving forward. The Sheer Pleasure building, has new owners. They're putting apartments upstairs very soon. There's a lot of really good development happening in downtown right now, and I really feel like there's a renewed excitement and interest in the hotel project. So if things go as planned, I feel like they will be moving forward very quickly with a meeting here in Edenton. And Emery, Mayor, y'all were there. Do you have anything to add?
I think you captured it. At the meeting, Mayor and Jennifer may remember that they quizzed me, the owner's representative quizzed me on what was going on with the Conger building and the brewery problem. We're like, we're not at liberty to say. But as soon as we were at liberty to say, we sent them a copy of the media release, and they were really excited to hear about that. So investment generates investment. That's what
Absolutely.
Jennifer preaches. And hopefully we'll see that with this project soon.
I think it meant a lot as well that they are investing their monies, that they've agreed at this point in time to invest a considerable amount of their own monies into it to move this project forward. And which I think if they had agreed to do that earlier, it may have worked differently. But
Mayor, I agree, and I think so much of that is because of the locals investing now and what they saw.
Yeah.
I think it gives them more confidence. So hopefully we'll see that come to fruition. Yeah.
any other questions for Jennifer?
Good news,
Yeah.
good news.
I appreciate it. Thanks all of
Jennifer.
y'all. Very much appreciated. The next item, Mayor Stallings, that we have on our administrative committee agenda is the reappointment of our boards and commissions. I'm happy to report, and Anne Marie's happy to report, that all of our board commission members that are eligible to serve another term are willing to serve again, and we would just ask that the agenda item be moved to our April 13th meeting for us to vote on that formally. Okay. Any objections to that? Okay. The last item that we have is the recommendation of approval of a lease agreement with WAF Contracting. WAF leases property from the town for storage of its equipment and materials on property that is adjacent to some WAF Contracting property. It's the former Gregory Pool property. The current lease is $5,519 per year. The lease is set up for a 5-year term, and since it is 5 years, I think it's important to note that there is a 1.5 annual increase, so it would increase automatically and hopefully give us a few extra funds each year. The proceeds from that lease go to the airport fund, is that correct,
Yes.
Ms. Knighton? And we are recommending that we approve this to the full council at the April 13th meeting. And if there's no further discussion on that, Mayor Stallings, that concludes our administrative committee report. Thank you.
Thank you, Hack. And our next committee is the Utilities Committee, and that is chaired by Councilman Miller of Public Works Committee.
Oh, sure, by me.
He's, Councilman Bond is the chair, you still.
I'm sorry.
That's fine, no problem.
But
But he's gonna do this, okay.
this is more of a
I
public,
apologize, I was
public,
He wanted to do it, so he can do it, okay?
overreading.
I know.
I think we're looking at this particular, agenda item as more public works.
No, it's utility, but you can do it.
Okay, is that it? All
Yeah.
right.
It's
All right.
utility, you can do it.
Mayor, as you know, the town is in the midst of finishing up phase 1 of the sanitary sewer inflow and infiltration I&I project. It's now time to consider a phase 2 I&I project. As you know, funding for the phase 1 I&I project was at zero interest, $1.1 million 20-year loan. Since the state has now changed the ratings for grant loan, the town might be eligible for a 50% grant for a $1.8 million phase 2 sewer rehab project. If the grant loan is awarded to the town, the Phase 2 I&I project would rehab sanitary sewer collection lines on Paxton Lane, First Street, Park Avenue, and Marsh Circle. Mayor, the Public Works Committee recommends we forward the authorization to submit the Phase 2 I&I project grant loan application request to full council.
Okay. All right, our next committee is the Finance Committee, and that's normally chaired by Councilman Dixon. In his absence, we'll ask Councilman Coleman to lead us on that.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 3 items on the agenda. 2 deal with Daedalus and their grant agreement and their loan agreement. I think because Ms. Knighton has met with the owners recently, I'll let her bring us up to date on where we stand on those 2 issues.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the county manager and I, along with the North Carolina Economic Development Partnership economic developer for our region, the 3 of us met with Daedalus a couple weeks ago. We got a tour of the manufacturing facility that has been up and running since after the first of the year. The property has been purchased by Daedalus. They're no longer leasing the land. They own it, which is a key part of the grant requirement. They have hired 29 employees, and they're actively recruiting to hire more. And they are confident that they'll be able to meet the requirements of the grant, that they hire or that they create 50 new jobs and retain the original 17 that they were approved when the grant was awarded to them back in March of 2019. You recall, for building reuse grants, the state requires that the town secure a deed of trust to be able to ensure that if the applicant does not fulfill the requirements, does not create all of the jobs, then the funds that were appropriated for improvements to the property can be, they call it clawed back, a clawback agreement. And the problem before was that the previous owner would not agree to a deed of trust because of financing that he had on the property. The building couldn't support the deed of trust. But now that Daedalus owns it, that's a huge hurdle. That company can execute the promissory note, and then the promissory note can be secured through a deed of trust that the town attorney would prepare and record and place on the property. The other difference with this grant is that the state required them to, as a condition, they have to create and maintain all of the jobs for at least 6 months before the funding will be released to the town for us to release it to the industry. Normally, the state does not require all the jobs to be created as a contingency, but because of experiences that the state has had with boat building, they wanted this requirement, and Daedalus agreed to it. So there's really very, very low risk. You're going to have a deed of trust, and the state is not going to release the money until they've created and maintained all the jobs for the required amount of time. So we feel that it is appropriate. We're comfortable recommending to the council that you execute the grant agreement and that you also execute the loan agreement. Now, a condition of that is that we've required the industry to submit to us right now documentation that their 29 jobs are being paid, people are being paid, 29 employees are on the payroll. They've hired a new CFO, and that person is supposed to be starting work, I think it's March 31st, or that last week in March. So by the time your April 13th meeting rolls around, we should have that documentation for you.
And you say on the payroll, at the annual salary of a certain amount, average amount?
I No, I don't think we would want to make that a requirement as of yet, because they'll only have had 29
Right.
jobs, and
Okay.
they're,
It's not until they get further on, okay.
exactly, yeah.
Did I understand that we will, if he defaults on the loan, that we are responsible for it?
So, the company is required to create the jobs, maintain the jobs, and then, they're also required to make an investment in the building. In exchange for all that, the state grants it's a forgivable loan. The money comes to the town, and then it goes to the industry. And if the industry were to not create the jobs and has spent all of the money that the state passed through, then we would be required to pay it back. And the way we would pay it back is by calling in the promissory note and the deed of trust. However, this case is so different. You know, that's how it worked with Colony Tire, with Regulator Marine, Nebraska Plastics. You sign those agreements where, yes, you know, we're responsible, but we're gonna fulfill our responsibility by executing a deed of trust on the property, so that if there was to be a default, we would be able to get funds back to pay the state. But I stress again with Daedalus, there's no way that they can default, because the state is not gonna give them their money
Right,
until they create all the jobs.
Okay.
Do
Which
they
is
feel pretty
unusual.
confident, do they feel pretty confident they can maintain these positions and,
The company?
yeah, the company
Oh,
stuff?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. But, you know, the key to us is not so much that they feel confident, the key is they own the building, and you all can tell Hood to record a deed of trust, so that, but still, I don't even see how that deed of trust is ever gonna come into play, because we are not gonna release the money
right.
until they certify that all of the jobs have been created and maintained for at least 6 months.
I was gonna ask, how does the 6 months come into play? Does that allow us to wait 6 months before we release the money?
Mhm, mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That-
Okay,
Yeah, we
well, I
won't
feel
even-
better about it
Makes you
now.
feel better.
We-
Calm down.
We won't even
Calm
be
down.
able,
Makes you feel better.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry,
feel
we
better
won't
too.
even be able to request the money from the state until 6 months after all the jobs are created.
With that 6-month period, is there a start date and an end date in 6 months? Will that be negotiated later, right?
I think it's based on, and you guys that are in business know the name of the form, the NC 101 that you have to file every quarter for unemployment. And so the state they'll require that quarterly report, and usually it's like on the quarters of the
Fiscal
calendar year. So say they create all the jobs in March, you know, then their NCU is filed, you know, in that next quarter, and then we'd have to wait 6 months from when that report was filed.
So just to help me understand,
So you read these?
I'm nervous about that.
Yeah.
At the end of 6 months, he's maintained all the jobs. We release the money to him. Okay, 12 months later, he shuts down, files bankruptcy. Where does that leave us?
The state, the requirement for the state is that those jobs be maintained for 6 months. And then that project is closed out, and there's no further obligation on
There's no
our
further
part.
obligation for us?
No.
Okay.
and also the grant amount provides $500,000, is that correct? But it requires them to make $1.6 million in improvements to the property. So for $500,000, they're gonna have to use their own money to improve the property to the tune of $1.6 million. And if they would default, then we've got foreclosure rights on building, a piece of property where $1.6 million worth of improvements have been made.
That's right, exactly.
So that gives me a little more comfort level.
And those
Because
improvements,
when we first started talking about it, I was, but is that correct?
It
That's
is.
the way I read it.
and those improvements have to be improvements that add value to the property. It
Mhm.
can't be certain equipment that can walk away.
Right.
So it's, and all that's been approved, reviewed and approved by the state. The proposed improvements have been deemed eligible for the grant.
And that's through the Department of Commerce,
Yes.
and this is not their first one of these grants.
Not their first rodeo.
Yeah. Okay.
That's good to hear.
Mayor, Finance Committee refers items 1 and 2 on this agenda to the, be considered at the April 13th meeting of the council. Final item has to do with insurance proceeds from the police car that ran into a deer and was totaled. And then we've received a check from the insurance company, $5,900, and the request that we put that into a police contingency fund, except that places it to a police contingency fund. Is that correct?
Yes.
What happened to the deer? I mean,
I don't think it ended well. We've had 2 encounters with deers and police cars, and we have those have you heard about these whistles that you can put on the front of the car?
Don't work.
That didn't help.
They don't work.
It's like those high-pitched sounds for pest control, yeah.
If there's no discussion, I will refer that to the April 13th meeting also.
And that completes our agenda.
Can I ask one question?
You may.
Have we got an update on the grocery store? Because I'm getting asked that question about every other day.
Yep. All that we're at liberty to say at this point in time is that the shopping center owner is in discussions with a second grocery store that is very interested in our market.
A second grocery store?
Well, Food Line is the first grocery store,
Okay.
so another, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
But as third parties, we can only do so much.
At this point, we're
Well, I think what the general public needs to understand is that, we can't force a grocery store to come here, and we're doing all we can as a council to get a second grocery store here, and we've certainly, investigated all the avenues, and we think that it's a possibility, but, we just got to hope and pray that it does work out. But we had a great happening down at the waterfront Saturday morning. Some of you were here to see it, some of you were not able to be here. But it was a very nice outing to honor Mr. Raymond Brown. I think he was overwhelmed by what was done for him. He seems to be, I do not know the gentleman personally, but from what everybody has said and everybody knows about him, he's just a wonderful person. And he's done a lot of things to help the school system out there and done a lot to help individual kids and this type of thing. So it was a very nice outing. Well, sorry you missed it.
Other engagement. I wish I had known.
Hey, I understand.
I want to thank Amy Wood for her organization, getting this thing going.
She did a great job. She really did, and she raised $35,000 for this job.
That's good.
Yes.
That's a big check.
Yeah, very
That's
good.
good. That's good.
Okay, that's the end of our agenda. We are just, excuse me.
Are you gonna, no, I don't have any cut across. He wants to come to our meeting on Wednesday, and I told him that other than you, he was the other big boss, that he can come to any meeting that he wants to, right?
Sure.
So we extend an open hand to you, open arms to you, for you to come on in.
Where is your meeting held? Right here?
Right here.
In council chambers?
Mm-hmm.
Great.
5:30
5:30.
Mhm.
I'll plan to be.
on Wednesday after
I may not stay the whole time,
Well, that's up to you, like I said, you the boss.
but, no, she's the boss. All right, we are dismissed.